We're happy to be back and we're keen to jump into this session. This is all about fantasy, and Jake here is our, I'm going to put it in air quotes, back-to-back champion up for debate. We can talk about that a little later, but how you going,
Sure.
Jake?
Yeah, I'm good, bro. I'll take the one-time champ, two-time champ with a disclaimer. Looking forward to this pod. Apologies to the people out there for a bit of a delay. Last week was pretty frantic for the both of us, but looking forward to probably getting in 2 episodes this week to catch up and talking all fantasy.
Exactly. I'm super keen for this one, and we actually wanted to talk about fantasy because we just did our fantasy draft, and Jake has been newly appointed commissioner, first time commissioner. How does that feel?
Look, it feels pretty good. If I can give myself a pat on the back for a moment, it feels right. It had to be you or me if the commissioner was departing because we're so into it and we're looking at it daily and we're just like fanatics, as we say. So I'm keen to represent the boys to the best of my ability, and hopefully it's a smooth and fun fantasy season.
Yeah, exactly. Just commiserations for losing our previous commissioner. Dom is an absolute legend and fearless competitor in the fantasy. So we salute you. We're going to miss you. And we're going to miss all the other boys this season. So, but
100%.
we've got a really good group this year. It's a lot of competition, and we're going in with some big money this year. Pretty keen for that.
100%. I know you weren't too keen on the big 5-0, but it should keep people interested
Oh
and the
well,
stakes
it's
high. So
good. I think now that we've got a good little prize pool, even if I don't win, at least I've got some money coming my way.
100%, 100%.
I just had to ensure that I wouldn't walk away with nothing.
Yeah, definitely. Just playing your cards right as you always do.
Exactly. All right. In terms of content for this pod, guys, we're going to talk about how to be successful in just NBA fantasy. Everything from knowing the rules, knowing the system that you're playing in, knowing who to draft, who not to draft, how to value players in fantasy because it's a little different to kind of valuing players in real life. And what we're going to do as well is we're just going to do a little bit of analysis on our league. We'll dissect my team, Jake's team. We're not gonna hold back on our own teams. We're not gonna say we're amazing, but we're gonna we're gonna dissect ourselves, and we'll also give you guys an insight into what we think about everybody else's team without giving it too much away because we're gonna want to throw some trades around. I'm sure, Jake. So we don't want to let
100%.
everything out.
I'm going to be so tame, to be honest. Like, I'm going to give the people the quality of the pod, but I'm not going to give my hottest, like my best takes,
We
because
can't. We
we
can't.
can't be doing that. Like, I know you're going to hold back who you want to take on waivers and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can do a little like best available on the waivers and see if we can make some cheeky emissions. See if anybody
Best
picks up on those.
best available, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Not
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Exactly.
Fucking hell,
It's the
that's
fifth
funny.
best available.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's since you're commish, how about you take us
Yes.
through the setup that we have for our fantasy league this year,
Yes.
and just generally how it works. One for the people that are watching that are part of the league that want to get to know the rules, and just for anybody else that kind of wants to learn what fantasy is all about.
Yeah, definitely. So we use the ESPN Fantasy app, which I think is the best by far. I have delved in Yahoo Sports a little bit. Admittedly, not as deep as ESPN, but I played a couple of seasons a few years ago. And for mine, if you're starting a league, I would definitely do ESPN. It's user friendly. The rankings are quite accurate. It's easy to make trades and sort of understand how things work. If you're new to it, the way our league works, we've got 14 teams, which is a lot for a fantasy league. There's an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference, but you can rename those to your liking. And the way it's going to work is we do a weekly matchup. So you verse another team for 7 days and you accumulate points based off stats. So points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, double doubles, triple doubles, 3 points made, and so on and so forth. You can also demerit points for turnovers, steals, ejections, fouls, things like that. So back to that matchup. After 7 days, if whoever has the most points out of the head to head gets one win on their register. And then there's 20 rounds for the whole season, so 20 weeks worth of matchups. And then the top six are automatically in the playoffs for our league. What I've done this year to mirror the NBA and keep it fun and interesting, in my opinion, is have 7, 8, 9, and 10 have a week 1 playoff play-in. So 7 plays 10 and 8 plays 9. And then the winner of those two fill out the final 2 playoff spots. Unfortunately, 11 to 14 are automatically eliminated because we can't give everyone a go. So then from there, it's the same. You just go 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. And then whoever gets it to all the way to the end is the champion. So there are different ways to play the league, but we've mainly played this, and this is what we're professional or analytic, like we know what we're talking about. So yeah, that's basically the gist of the league.
Yeah, thanks for going through all that. And as you say, like, because this is what we've played, this is what we know, this is kind of how I've geared my fantasy mind around.
Yeah.
And obviously, point systems can work drastically differently league to league in terms of how you calculate points, how you want to reward things, how you want to demerit things. But it's just so different to the statistics head to head, which I've done a couple of seasons. And like in terms of just team composition, how much you need to put in analytically to work out how good your team is going to be on a week-to-week basis is pretty tough. Like when you're going up head-to-head in all those categories, like some players that are super viable in point systems tend to really hurt you in other areas, like field goal percentages or 3-point percentages, etc., which sometimes make or break those head-to-head weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a really interesting one, but yeah, we won't get too much into that. But
Yeah.
What are you going to say there?
No, nothing. I was just going to say you really have to throw your biases out the window as well, because the type of player that I like in real life doesn't necessarily always translate to NBA fantasy in a scoring league. And that's a good segue to the first talking point, which is how to be successful in an NBA fantasy draft and the league. So yeah, without sounding corny, you got to have a good level of understanding of the game, and you also got to know, like I said, the difference between a winning player and someone who is a good fantasy asset. In my opinion, you want to find someone who is physically consistent in terms of not getting injured, and to add to that, who can play big minutes. You need someone who can fill up the stat sheet. Obviously, not everyone's a superstar that can get a triple double or score 30 points, but you want to nail the deeper part of the draft with guys that can score the ball, get a few peripheral stats, and just add to your totals, to juxtapose the guys who are getting you your big fantasy scores. So that's the main way I try to be successful, by doing my homework, knowing the players of this league, how to, properly value them and where to pick them in the draft. And if you can get that right and stay focused on the NBA throughout the season, you can make changes based on if something was once one way and now it's not the other in terms of a player. And yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking to do my seasons, and it's worked for me so far. But did you have anything to add to that? I kind of covered a lot of things there, but
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, I think that's really comprehensive, and I think it's going to really work. Like some of the stuff that you've mentioned is going to like really flow nicely into some of these kind of topics that we want to rattle off. But before I get to that, I just want to address a comment that I see in chat, which is around, I thought it was the team's combined weekly stats, not individual player versus player. So it isn't individual player versus player. So every player individually contributes to your daily and weekly total, but the only assessment of whether you win or lose is at the end of the week and what your total points are versus the other team that you're versing, their total points. So yeah, there's no daily player versus player competition, so you don't need to worry about that. It's just the total score at the end of the week.
Yeah, just to add to that, to support your comments, Luca, basically just have guys that are going to pop off and get good stats. There's no like set matchup. It's just total combined versus total combined after 7 days. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got Issa in chat, who's actually for the first time catching one of these. Welcome. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your viewership. All right. Well, what I wanted to touch on, since you had a really comprehensive kind of like thought process around, choosing those guys that pop off versus those guys that can kind of really be available, be consistent, get you numbers.
Yeah.
Who are some players at least this season, or maybe even based on previous seasons' performance, based on the amount of years that we play fantasy. Who are your general do not draft players and must draft players? It doesn't you don't need to maybe necessarily touch on specific players, but maybe like in an
Yep.
archetype, and just generally what kind of player and what they do on the court.
Luca doesn't want to give away his good players. Um, for the do not draft, I definitely use an archetype. So basically, in a nutshell, if I can make it one sentence, but I will expand on it, huge former names. So don't draft guys who used to be big or a star or put up big numbers, who make the Instagram, the house of highlights, who are no longer that. So they're a shell of themselves. A couple of classic names are guys like, and this is not giving away any intel, Kevin Love, DeAndre Jordan archetype. I know a lot of people who might not watch the game as religiously as you or I, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they see the name Kevin Love and they think, oh my God, Kevin Love. I remember him at Minnesota. He won a championship with LeBron. He's got a gold medal. He's a good 3-point shooter, when in actuality, Kevin Love may come back, but in the last couple of years, we've both seen on a losing team, chronically injured, just doesn't seem like he should be in Cleveland. So really try and put aside the name bias and go for guys that you know are currently performing or can come back from poor form. So don't go for the big name for the sake of it. Like, I'd hate to see someone maybe a couple of years ago who was new to fantasy saw Vince Carter and thought, oh my God, he's good. But just do your homework is what I'm trying to say. So that's
I'll,
on my do not draft category.
I'll add something to that actually, and thankfully we've last year and this year as well, we have a pretty switched on group that do know the ins and outs of what's going on in the sport. Some people a little more than others, but a perfect example of where this happened very recently. 2 seasons ago, Hassan Whiteside was a roughly 40-point fantasy point player in our league.
Yep.
He
Yep.
was, playing lots of minutes, racking up points and boards. He was a really strong fantasy asset. And the year later, I can't remember if he got traded or left in free agency, went to Sacramento, and instantly, like, our league knew that his former value wasn't there anymore. And I think in our league, he was drafted 10th in the 10th round, which is super reasonable for a guy that went 40 fantasy point average the previous season. You're like, all right, the 10th round, like, take a flyer, like 100%. But in other leagues, I actually think I read some reports that his average was the 3rd or 4th round, and he
Wow.
was like a sub 20 fantasy points player. Like,
Yeah.
he
Wow.
did not even do half of what he did the season before. And for managers that took him in the 3rd or 4th round, just purely based on name and not considering the situation where he was going. Smyrny with the follow.
That's not even
That's
me.
that's not even Jake.
That's another Smurdy, but I think that's Xander. So appreciate you, Xander. But go on. Sorry,
Yeah,
Luca.
no, that's pretty much it. Like, exactly what you said. People go off big name and what they did last season without sort of taking into consideration what their current season looks like, or what it's projected to look like, and their situation and who the player is.
Definitely. Kudos to our draft, or sorry, our league a couple of seasons ago, because before you mentioned that, I forgot. But now I remember. I think it was the 18-19 season, I want to say, or maybe it was before me, but I do remember Hassan Whiteside going a lot lower than what some non-NBA fanatics would know. So yeah, that reasonable drafting position of the round 9, round 10 is accurate, and it does reflect that our league was switched on, which is good.
Yeah. I'll add to something in the do not draft, and again, an archetypal kind of thing. We've kind of touched on it. It's just come through in the chat as well from Issa. Biggest thing to avoid is also injury prone players. Absolutely, 100%. It's a massive consideration when you're looking at your fantasy squad, because one of the most important things we've seen, especially towards the back end of the season, is availability. And you don't want to lose matchups because you've got someone that you tied up in your first few rounds, that is, or maybe not the first few rounds, but you've tied yourself up into someone that you can't drop because they're too good to drop, but they're very rarely available, or not rarely available, but less available than they are available, if that makes sense. And obviously with guys like Anthony Davis, that he's a first round fantasy player. You know he's probably going to battle some injury throughout the season, but it's still a guy that you kind of have to take in the first or second round just because, just purely from a numbers perspective, the games that he does play, he's going to deliver. Where I think the most important area of the draft to avoid injury prone players or perceived injury prone players is probably in that mid section of the draft. What do you think, Jake?
No, it's an interesting comment from Issa and good takes from you. And I'm glad he, inadvertently said that because that was one of our topics. And you know what? I'm going to go against, not against completely what you say, but I'll say this. I feel like unless it's a frequent degenerative injury, like a Porzingis knee or something like that, an injury prone or an injured player are that until they're not. And I know that sounds a bit silly, but what I mean is we get guys in the league who have such a horrendous run with injuries and then all of a sudden become like warriors in the sense of they don't miss a game. They play 35, 40 minutes and you forget that they were injured. Some classic examples might be Blake last year for Brooklyn in the playoffs. I know they really calculated how they played him in the regular season, but a clearer, cleaner example would be Brook Lopez. I remember when he was in the Brooklyn Nets team, he had foot injuries for two
Signature
or three
move was
seasons.
breaking his foot.
Yeah, like for 2 or 3 seasons, I think he never eclipsed 40 or 45 games. And now for Milwaukee, I don't want to jinx you, Brooke. I apologize if karma comes to get me, but he doesn't miss games. He plays 38, 40 minutes. He's like an absolute machine. So I, it comes down to where you draft them. So the draft comment was good. But for example, I think one of our boys, Nick, drafted Kawhi in the 10th or the 11th round. That's probably a smart place to draft because you can hold him even though he probably won't play with the prospect that he might come back. And that's probably a drastic example because that's an ACL. But the point I'm trying to make is if you believe in the talent and you think this injury isn't degenerative and you've done your homework, I would actually back the talent and keep your fingers crossed. Obviously, there's going to come a time where you might have to cut bait if he doesn't ever come back. An example last year might be Jaren Jackson Jr., but I would take an injured player personally if the talent is right and the draft position is right.
Look, I absolutely agree with you on that. And a perfect example is, and we'll get into our teams a little later on, but I drafted perhaps two potentially injury-prone players, or you might perceive them as injury-prone players. I got Victor Oladipo with my 127th pick, so in the 10th
Yep.
round.
Yep.
And Oladipo is, obviously he's battled his injuries the last couple of seasons. He's potentially projected to be back to full contact basketball in November. And he's a player that can play 30 plus minutes, score 20 points a game. And at 10th round, like if that works out for me, that's value. And I'm not too worried if it doesn't work out because I'm prepared to cut my losses at the 10th round.
100%.
And a more extreme example is I've taken Gordon Hayward with my 71st pick in the 6th round.
Yep.
And Gordon Hayward, again, battled injury, didn't look like his former self at the Celtics, but in the games that he did play with Charlotte, and again, 30 plus minutes, about 20 points a game, really good fantasy asset. So when I saw him slip to the 6th round, like he's a third, 4th round player if he's healthy. So
Definitely.
sometimes you just kind of for me injury prone players and injured players is all about draft positioning, but also like sometimes you just ignore it, like what happened with James Harden, what happened with Kevin Durant missed however many games he missed last season. You're not going to take Kevin Durant in the first round, or James Harden for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. And Issa's comment got us to the injury section, but going back around, who are your must draft players? Maybe not specifically naming names, or we could because most of the must draft players are
Have
probably
been
high
drafted.
draft
Yeah,
picks.
exactly.
Yeah. But what are you thinking in terms of like an explanation for people out there who probably haven't drafted yet? Because just a quick side note, we actually drafted super early, and that'll actually help a lot of people who haven't done their drafts like us because we've got like another 5 or 6 weeks till the season starts. So yeah, what are you thinking with the must draft category?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things for me, and I can talk about a few players, and we can have a bit of a fantasy discussion on some fantasy assets. But then also
Yeah.
just a big thing for me around must draft players is something that we've kind of spoken about throughout this entire piece, but it's all around like kind of context, situation. For example, must draft players to me are players that have found themselves in a position where they're going to play a lot of minutes. They've got a very good role in their team, and you know that role isn't going to change too much throughout the season. You know, injury, barring injury, they will remain, the starting point guard or locked in as that sixth man. Jordan Clarkson is a great example of that. He comes off the bench. And some people might be like, "Oh, fantasy, like coming off the bench. I don't know about that." But the guy, certified to play about 30 minutes a game. He's going to get you
Yeah.
buckets. He's going to get you the time that he's on the court. His role is very clear, and he's going to do his role perfectly. And that to me translates to a great fantasy asset. Outside of the regular stuff, which is, obviously you're going for your superstars. But when you come out of those first few rounds and you're really looking at like the must draft people, I think you absolutely just need to understand who that player is, what their value to a team is, and how at threat their role is. So what I might bring up Gordon Hayward here again, just because I think he's a good example. Charlotte have had a lot of change this season. Obviously, slightly injury prone. They've added some depth to that kind of front court there in Kelly Oubre at the small forward position. Bridges mostly plays the power forward and he'll start at the power forward spot, but he probably could creep into those minutes and take them
Yeah.
away from Gordon Hayward. And
Yeah.
then they have a really stacked backcourt as well. So for example, you might see a small ball lineup where they push out, for example, Book Knight to the small forward. Like all these positions don't really like matter anymore in the NBA. It's so fluid. So you can kind of
Yes.
see based on the team that Gordon Hayward might have a bit of his role pulled away from him. But at the
Mm.
same time, I think like he's the clear cut starting small forward, and if he's healthy, he's going to soak up most of the minutes of that position.
Definitely, definitely. That was very well said. I'll take it a different direction because you've covered a lot of the good stuff there in the middle of at the end of the draft, and it does come back around to what I said about just doing your homework. I know everyone might not be able to watch every NBA game, but even if it's just checking stats, reading, smaller articles, and understanding what players are in form and what players aren't, because a guy like Jordan Clarkson, like you said, not everyone thinks about Jordan Clarkson as a fantasy asset because he comes off the bench, but not smart people, but people that know the NBA know that he's going to have a defined role, have really specific minutes, and do a really specific thing, which is score the ball and be a microwave off the bench. But I digress back to what I was saying about the earlier part of the draft. This year, as you've probably noticed, Luca, and you can flame me if you want, but I'm pretty convicted on this. I'm really infatuated with young players and young stars who are already contributing to real life winning and filling up the stat sheet. So guys like Luca, Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, etc. I got Tatum personally, and unfortunately, Fox and Luka Doncic weren't there for me where I was drafting. And I personally think this year's draft class is phenomenal, up there with 1983 or 84, the Jordan draft, the Kobe draft in 96, and LeBron's draft in 2003, which is why I took guys like Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green, both who have a specific role similar to what you were discussing, Luca, on their respective teams. I think Cade Cunningham is going to run the point for Detroit. He seems like a big, durable, reliable player. And Jalen Green, who is a little bit more limber, he just scores the ball effortlessly. I got a bit stuck there, but yeah. So I've picked guys with defined roles, and I really
Yeah.
back youth this year. Even guys like Brogdon, who's in his mid-20s, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who's in his early 20s, and the list goes on. So pick guys you like, do your homework, and stick to youth for this season. But this is just my opinion. It could backfire, but I'm going to go with the youth movement.
I really like that comment around youth, and we kind of did the exact same thing last year to a certain extent. Last year,
Mm.
I took Halliburton and I took Obi Toppin Toppin
Mhm.
was injured and mostly didn't play the season, so that didn't turn out too well for me. But we saw what Halliburton became. I believe you took Lonzo, and we traded on that.
Lamelo,
Sorry,
yeah, yeah,
Lamelo. What am I saying? And we
yeah,
traded
yeah,
on
yeah.
that, and then we both, for the purposes of our fantasy matchups, dropped both those players.
Don't remind me.
And yeah, so things didn't turn out too well with some of those moves and drops. But look, that's another thing that we can kind of touch on around like the importance of winning matchups, which we'll get to. But I really love the youth movement. I think
Yeah,
it's so important to kind of like where you'll find you win in fantasy is by having a really kind of deep number of players that will give you anywhere between 25 to 35 fantasy point, at least in our league, 25 to 35 fantasy points a game.
yep,
Everybody's infatuated with, 37, 38, 39, 45, 50. Everybody wants to make these big deals, big players, which obviously they are immeasurably valuable to your team, in terms of just consistency and just raw numbers. But where you win is having like you only have two of those guys. If you're lucky, you have three. Where you win is players 4 to 8, 9, where they're giving you just every week a good roughly 30 number. And that's where I think those young guys come in a lot. They have
yeah.
really set out roles for them. They're a deep class. There's a lot of talent there, and they're going to come in straight away. They're professionals pretty much. A lot of them coming from the G League, and they're going to play 30 minutes a game, and they're going to do what they're being paid to do.
Definitely. And just to add to the youth movement, I think my draft strategy this year is an emotional knee jerk to letting Lamelo go so early last year, and then sorry, trading a Lamelo to you, having Halliburton, and then second guessing it because even I, as the eventual winner of the league, I was doing knee jerk reactions to the beginning of the season because I wanted to win my matchup. I was fixated on winning my matchup and having a good record and not piling up the losses, even though I knew my knowledge and my strategy and my uh, activeness in the league will eventuate in me at least getting a playoff spot. But I was so fixated on being the top dog. Luckily, it worked out for me. But if anyone's listening out there, don't care about the weekly matchups to the point where you're dropping quality players or players you believe in just to get that win. So that's all. That's all else I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I feel like it's something that's worth chatting about. Just because I dropped Lamelo because I was looking to win a matchup, and I didn't drop him immediately. But I had a really rough start to the season. I was battling a lot of injury. At one point, I had 3 or 4 of my top players sitting out, and to try and save what I could of my season and get to the playoffs, I felt like I had to win some key matchups when I was close. So I ultimately dropped players like LaMelo to bring in some points for the week to win. Maybe not the right choice based on what LaMelo became, but at the same time, I got pretty deep into the playoffs and just I think I had an unfortunate run with injury and all that. I'm not going to use that as an excuse, but I think, yeah, definitely when you're looking at the quality of players and if you believe in somebody, based on if your situation doesn't deem it necessary for you to drop them, like if you don't have 3 injured players and you want to make sure you win your matchup, keep them. Like write them out for at least a week or 2 longer,
Yeah,
because it can change so quickly.
100%. And also, if anyone watching, I know there's not too many, but if you have any questions, just shoot them in the comments because we can talk about fantasy all night and we're not going to go too long today because we're going to do a couple. But if you have any questions, let us know. Luca, I want to put you on the spot here with a couple of our rosters in the league.
Sure.
Sorry, boys, but we're gonna just do a bit of a backstab right off the bat. Who is your least favorite team and why? And I think the boys in our group chat can take a bit of flack, so they're strong. They're strong, big boys. They can take it.
Who is my least favorite team? All right, putting me on the spot a lot
Have a
with
look
this
around.
one.
Have a look around.
Yeah. All right, you give me
Want me to
yours.
go first?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then I'll have a look around and see whether or not I agree with you.
All right. Well, look, I don't think he's watching because he's a big Connor State store manager. This is Lukey Alejandro, and he had the first pick of the draft. So, Lukey, I'm very sorry, my friend. I love you, but I'm gonna have to say your team on paper, I could be wrong. Who the hell knows? Maybe you think my team's the worst, but on paper, I'm gonna say your team is looking the least promising. The reason being is you had the first pick and you drafted Giannis. Can't fault you for that. He's going to be an absolute stud as he always is. You've also got Bam Adebayo, Ja Morant, who again, absolute stars. They're going to give you 40 to 50 points a game. I also like
Got the roster up here so people can see it.
I also like CJ as a 35 to 40 point guy, and I had him last year after he broke his foot, and he could explode for big games in the 40s and 50s in terms of actual real life scoring. But then I think what happened with you, Lukey, is the bottom of the draft where you had to really nail those quality role players. I think you came up a little bit short. So guys like Jay Crowder, he's the kind of dude who will give you 2 points, one rebound, one assist, but still have a great game. So that's the kind of classic example that I was talking about with not always the winning players give you fantasy production. And then Wendell Carter Jr., this guy hasn't been anything for 2 or 3 years. Will he find that in Orlando? Possibly. You've got guys like Mo Bamba and a couple of other people who might take his minutes. But again, unless he's giving you 12 to 14 points, 12 to 14 rebounds, I think he's probably someone who can be on the waivers and just get picked up to win a matchup. Giddy, well, we've spoken about Giddy. We're pretty low on him, so I don't want to be too biased, but I don't see him giving good fantasy production. So overall, Luke, I think you got some top dogs, but yeah, I don't know how you're going to win on the days that Giannis, Bam, and Ja and CJ aren't playing, and there's a good chance for multiple days of a weekly matchup they might not be there. So for those reasons, I'm so sorry, but you get my L to start the season.
Um,
What are your takes? Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
no, you're definitely right, and it's something that we spoke about earlier, like the importance of like how important players, 4, 5 are through to 10. And I really like Ja, really like CJ, Giannis, Bam, all great picks. D'Lo, pretty good, like he'll give you some numbers, but like outside of that, like when those guys aren't playing, or if only one or two of them are playing, the rest of this roster is not great.
But you know what? Like while you're still thinking, Luca, if you just scroll up to my team, like I've gone real like basketball fantasy nerd on the league this year. Maybe I'm getting a bit cocky, but at the top, I'm Dort Vader if you can't find it.
Oh, there you are. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
that's right.
let's assess our teams here.
Okay, so real quick, Jason Tatum, arguably a top 10 player in the league. He averaged 47 fantasy points a game last year. That's a no-brainer. I've gone for a risk at my second overall pick with Shea. I think you'd agree with me, it's not really a risk because I think OKC will play a bit more than they did last year, given they've locked up a couple of those picks. But he's a fantastic Swiss Army knife point guard who can score the ball, rebound, and assist. So, for the reason of the triple double alert, being young, being consistent, even though he's got a day to day next to his name, I went for him. Just that youth movement. And then the big swing was Cade Cunningham at third. So, I won't go through everyone, but basically, I've chosen guys who I believe in, who have youth, who have a specific skill set for fantasy, which I believe is going to work. So, yeah, I've got Kuminga, Sangoon, Green, and Cunningham all out of this draft. So I've taken four rookies. And I think my big four of Brogdon, Shea, Tatum, and Cade will be good. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I really liked some of your swing for the fences here, like Cade in the third round. You picked up Kelly Oubre pretty late, which I thought was really nice.
Yep.
He went very early in last year's draft, and there
Oh
was some
God.
raised eyebrows there. We're not going to talk about the trade that transpired after that involving Kelly. Um, Kelly essentially became LeBron James. We don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
Um,
so before you go on, Issa's given me a bit of a roasting, which is totally fine. But just to answer and defend my team, Luca, sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I picked Drummond.
I'll
Where
pull it
does it
up. I'll
say?
pull it up now. It was very late. You picked Drummond up 122nd, so in the ninth round.
Yeah, so Issa, my thinking basically was if you don't know, I actually hate Drummond as a real life player. Luca can attest to that. In group chats, I just absolutely flame him because he's not a winning type of guy. But even behind Embiid, if you said to me Drummond's going to average 12 to 14 points and 8 or 9 rebounds, that equals out to about 30 to 35 fantasy points. And if he can do that consistently, to get someone in the 10th round doing that, like Lucas said, you want to have guys between 25 to 35 throughout your roster. I just thought he was a value grab. He was not on my mock draft at all, but dropping that far, similar to some other players that did that, you just have to take them sometimes. So, not to mention, my draft strategy was a bit poor in the sense that I got to the 9th or 10th round without actually getting a center. So I had to sort of
Yeah.
go for it, and he was there. So it could be bad, but it's a 9th or 10th pick. So if I have to drop him, it's not like I'm going to be crying about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree. Like you can see some of these just to show you. Like he was playing between 20, mostly in the 20-minute range, and he was getting 21 minutes 35, 29 minutes 35, 22 minutes 40. And then when he
Yeah,
played 36 minutes, he got a 50 clip. So,
yeah,
yeah, I imagine he'll probably not creep into the 30-minute mark much at all at Philly, if even like 25 minutes. But like if he's playing around 20 minutes, I can see him putting up 10 and 10 like pretty
yeah.
easily.
And
So
if Embiid gets injured, it's like it just skyrockets. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that
yeah,
Embiid's health permitting is a very very big thing.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, have you got a selection for your least favorite yet, or are you still scanning?
I'm still scanning, but how about I just put myself on the spot and get you to break down what you think of my team,
Oh,
and I'll give you my thoughts
okay.
once I hear what you think about my squad.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
like
Look, definitely.
where is my squad? Hold on, my
We
team. Here we go.
if if you go to the league and then rosters, it has all of them. I think. Like,
Okay.
is there a section saying rosters?
League rosters.
Yeah, there. Click on that,
Yeah.
and then
Oh,
you're at the
very
top.
nice. Okay, cool. Hold on. I'm just gonna reposition us real quick, just so I can get a bit more. Give me 1 second. Let's do a bit of Jenga right here. I'm gonna make myself a little smaller. Ah, what is going on? All right, keep you there. I'm gonna bring you over here, Jake.
No drama.
All right, on the fly, so we can get some of this up. All right, let's get all these rosters up.
Too easy.
Here we go.
Yes.
All right.
So looking at your
Here is
looking
me.
at yeah, looking at your team, Luca, I really respect our fantasy professional friendship, if you want to call it that. But no, all jokes aside, I think you've got a really, really, really solid team. If you want me to be hypercritical and like just tear everything apart just for feedback's sake, I think the Westbrook pick in the first round is going to be bang or bust kind of thing. Not bust in the sense of he won't put up numbers, but maybe what?
Technically, it was my second round pick.
Oh, sorry,
My first.
your first pick of the second round.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. So
I went with
even at that
Zion.
level, I'd probably say, for me personally, even though I had him last year and he dropped 70s and 80s on the regular, which is absolutely insane, for me he's probably a 25 to 35 pick. So you haven't gone that far early, and I really do like it because if he does pull off and LeBron wants to rest, he's just a triple double machine. There are people thinking that maybe his role is diminished because this is the first time in his career less is expected of him. But at the same time, even if it is diminished, if he's giving you 45 to 50, that's probably a first round pick production. But I guess it's hard because I'm comparing Westbrook to Westbrook. And when you do that, it's kind of unfair. Like he might not do what he did at Washington, but if he does what even 90% of that at Lakers, he probably
Yeah.
still is that. So
What did he give you? What did he give you at Washington? Like nearly a 60 clip on average.
I think he averaged 60. So the more I talk about it, the more I'm actually changing my mind. So this is really bad on the fly analysis. But apart from that, you mentioned Gordon in the 6th round. Again, not much risk, but like he can get injured, so he might be a bit unavailable for you. KCP and Ivica Zubats don't get me super excited. I'm concerned that, well, again, contradicting myself, Kawhi's not playing this year, so Zubats actually might
That's
soak up
that's
a lot of
that's
regular
that's why
season.
that's why I went with Zubats
Yeah,
at like my very last. He was my last pick, so my
yeah, yeah,
155th pick in the 12th round. And if I just look at some of these numbers real quick,
yeah,
you can see that obviously when he doesn't play, things happen. But when he does play, he can put up respectable numbers. And I think there's just an opportunity for him with the Clippers this year to really not
yeah.
shine, but I think I'm I went with the idea that if I start him the season and see how he goes, it could work out well. But I don't
Yeah.
know. It might not,
No,
but that's fine. Like he's cutting my last pick. It doesn't make me emotional at all.
no, and I think I've got to turn off my emotional side of my brain because I don't have the sexiest teams in the past and they've helped me win. Your team is very solid from top to bottom. Maybe you swing for the fences and do a 3-for-1 trade for an absolute superstar if need be,
That's what I'm
and
thinking.
pick up some waiver scraps. But you've got guys from basically Westbrook all the way down to Oladipo, who are probably viable in a trade. I guess guys like Doug and Contavious Caldwell Pope will stay on your roster because even though they're solid, how much value do they bring to a potential trade? But yeah, bro, I think you've drafted fantastically. I had Zion in my first round mocks as well, just behind Tatum. I love Van Vliet as a solid point guard. So yeah, I think you've done well,
I
truly.
I just want to call out, and I've spoken to you at length about how much I loved my Doug McDermott pick, but
Oh yeah,
just for the viewers, watch me get All Star for Doug McDermott. Mark my words. This
All
guy
Star.
in a 3-for-1 trade, just
Oh yeah,
watch
yeah,
it
yeah.
happen. This
Okay.
man, look, you had him for a good portion of the season. Look at these numbers,
Oh
based on
yeah,
what he was
he was good.
doing at Indiana, and he's just put himself. Not he hasn't put himself into that situation, but he's found himself in a situation where San Antonio has just shipped all their whole team pretty much. They're starting from rock bottom, and that 24 and a half minutes a game is going to be 33, 34 minutes a game, and you can see what he was doing with the time that he had. I think he's going to
100%.
be an 18, 19 point a game player. So I've got high hopes for him.
And just on an aside as well, not to talk about non-fantasy, but for my Lakers, I wanted Lakers to do something around Doug McDermott and maybe TJ McConnell to help LeBron and AD.
Yeah,
So as a real life player as well, he's awesome. He can attack the basket, shoot threes, good off screens, and that'll help you get like that 25 to 30, hopefully consistently.
yeah, exactly. Also, just saw in the chat, hold up, Kawhi isn't playing this year. It's not officially confirmed. He has gone through surgery for that ACL, and apparently it was a minor tear. But in saying that, there is reports that, the rumor mill is suggesting that there might be a high chance that he doesn't play the season at all.
Yeah, that's it.
But I
You've dodged
think
enough. You've dodged
I've
enough.
dodged
Tell
enough.
me.
I'll tell you right now. All right. My least favorite team is. Where is he? Where are you going?
There's the anticipation.
Right here.
Oh, he's
Right.
watching as well.
Right here.
Stefan.
Stefan, what were you doing, buddy?
Oh God. Love you,
Um,
bro.
I look. I'm not gonna grill you too hard because I really do like parts of your team. I love Jokic. I think you had the second pick. Personally, I would have gone for Luca. But I can't fault you taking Jokic. He was last year's MVP, and he's gonna do what he does. You know, Averaging a 60
Sorry,
clip.
sorry. Oofed is that Dennis Schroeder. That's the best comment I've ever read.
Drop him now.
Oofed is
Is
that
that-
Dennis Schroeder. That'll fucking just turn the clip off now. I'm gone.
I'm done.
I'm gone. All right, sorry, go on.
No,
That was
that's
so
so
good.
good. Yeah, look, I personally would have gone with Luca with my second pick, but I can't fault Jokic either. He's going to do what he does and get you lots of points. The double bogey play, the double Bogdanovich play was just, I don't know. Not a massive fan of that. Bogdanovic had a really good run of form late in the season. I picked him up for that, and this was another player that was on Jake's radar last year, and we transacted on Bogdanovic, and then
Yeah,
I had
both
to drop him.
bogey for bogey.
Yeah,
That's what it was, wasn't
yeah.
it?
I dropped Bogdanovic. I got Atlanta Bogdanovic, and I dropped him later in the season because he got injured. So I just took him off the roster, and he was really like, I mean, coming back from that injury, he was inconsistent, and then that like very end of the season, he was wicked good. But in saying that, I just think a lot of that season also, DeAndre Hunter was injured and didn't play,
Yep.
and Bogdanovic had some more minutes there because Hunter wasn't playing. And I think once Hunter is back, he would soak up more of Bogdanovic's minutes. So, and because he was having a really good run as well. So I just see probably a slightly, not diminished role. He'll still give you good value. Just, I don't know, going double on them was just a bit, I don't know,
I think
overzealous.
I think what it was, Stefan, is you drafted them 55th and 58th respectively. If you drafted them 75th and 78th, we'd probably not have a problem with it, or maybe 85th or 88th. So your assessment of value is probably 30 picks too high, which again, who are we to say? Maybe Bogdan, the Atlanta one, he pops off and then we all look stupid. And Boyan, the Utah Bogdanovic, he had a pretty inconsistent season last year, but the season before, if memory serves me correctly, he was averaging over 30. So it could come true, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm using a lot of word gymnastics to make your team, sound like it's going to contend. You're going to need the best out of Bledsoe, Al Horford, Klay Thompson coming back healthy, Mike Conley staying injury free, Schroeder on that redemption tour, and then both bogeys being around that fifth round, sixth round production. So again, love Lowry, love Jokic, can see this team doing something, sneaking into the playoffs, but I do have a lot of question marks, and I can see why Luca gave you the early season L, but prove us wrong, truly.
Another thing that I wanted to throw in is just Lowry. I like Lowry, but seeing you draft him in the second round at 27th overall gave me heart palpitations. Um, I I think he's going to be an integral part of that Miami team, but just for a player of his age, like being on a not a like I don't want to say decline because he's good, but just I don't know, at second round value, I just don't know if you're going to get what you could have gotten out of him if you went some other second round talent. Yeah, that's all I've got to say on Lowry. Love Lowry, but I just feel like you overvalued him a little bit as well.
You know what though? Like I'll defend it a little bit. I agree with that. If Lowry and Horford can both have pretty healthy seasons, Horford's back in Boston, which I keep forgetting, and I could like people think Horford is done, but that was because he played for OKC. He might
I
be
like
done.
Horford at the
Yeah,
Celtics.
but I could see him averaging 17 and 9 again. And Lowry, if he does his usual, 15, 8 and 5, they could be great. But like, it's just the injuries and for me, like it hurts my head because the values have all been wrong. Like if Lowry was fourth round, I'd be like, cool. And if Bogdanovic was eighth round, but like, I guess I can't get too fixated on how you got to where you got. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
One thing that I did want to give you a cheeky commendation on, because I also wanted him in the same round where you took him, Duncan Robinson with your 142nd pick in the 11th round was quite nice.
Yeah, that was good.
He's just been given the bag. He's got that kind of wing roll on lock. He's gonna shoot the shit, and he'll be a great player in that Miami rotation. So that late in the draft, I mean, he could be someone that ends up being a waiver wire whore, as we like to say.
Yeah,
But he's like taking a chance on him at the 11th round in the 11th round is great.
definitely.
One last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, Jake, before we probably
Sure,
start wrapping up.
sure.
Conversely, who is your favorite team? Who got
Oof.
the early season dub?
All right, so can you quickly skim over some teams? Because I got a couple. Because I just want to shout out to all the boys in our league. A lot of you drafted super duper well, but can we quickly just focus on easy money sniper Durant, so Maxim, your brother. I know he had one of the best advisors in the fucking league helping him, but I'm looking at that roster, Donovan Mitchell and James Harden and Rudy Gobert. Like, obviously people won't think about Gobert, but he's around about an average 40 clip, which is huge. You've got Gobert and Mitchell who are probably going to combine for 85 fantasy points a night, plus Harden, who's probably going to average like 50, 55 to get sub, what's that, like 130, 140 out of three players is insanity. And then the rest of the roster is just super solid with guys who can pop off. You got Siakam in the injury rotation, Gallinari, Jackson, Herder, all guys that can just be solid. So I think Maxim or Easy Money Sniper Durant is going to be a dark horse. And I'm not just saying that because he's your brother. I genuinely think that he's going to be awesome. Another guy I wanted to scroll to is actually Scotty Gould or Scotty Ghosts. The team, he's down the bottom. The team
Yeah.
on paper, you might look at and go, I don't know about that. It's not the sexiest names, but guys like Randall and Embiid are going to absolutely stuff the stat sheet in the Eastern Conference. Even Olynyk in Detroit, I think, is a very underrated selection. And then if Chris Paul and Sexton do what they do as explosive, well, Sexton's an explosive point guard and Chris Paul's that, assist machine. I guess health is a bit of an issue. I
This
feel like
yeah, this was a
Scotty,
little bit of a concern for me when I saw it at the start, but I think he really
yeah,
did redeem himself overall with the quality of the draft.
yeah. Look, I guess what I'm trying to say without handing out too many flowers is that team does look a lot better than what it seems. Maybe I'm being a bit overzealous to include him in my winners, but I do like the sneakiness of that side. And then real quickly, just scrolling around, um, yeah, I think that's where the buck stops for me. Yeah, well, obviously this is the obvious one, but Rare Air, our friend Dan at the top, he just like Simmons, Durant, Booker, like holy crap, DeRozan, like those four guys have probably averaged 200, 250 between them. So he's got some huge names, but similar to a lot of the guys, kind of spluttered at the end in the sort of 8 to 12 range of the draft.
Yeah, I want to give a special shout out as well to Dem Valley Boys, who has really
Yep.
done well over the last couple of years to continue improving his fantasy game. And I like what he's done. Like he does stick to his kind of players often, and a lot of the time you see some similar faces on his team. But Trey, Brad, Carice, Malik. Jalen Suggs
Mm,
there too, I think is really underrated. I like Jalen
mm,
Suggs. He
yep.
also took Mikal Bridges 128th, so in the 10th round, and Aaron Gordon as well in the 11th round. So I liked both those players where he grabbed them, and I think they're great
Just,
little additions to that team right down the end.
just
And
a quick one, sorry,
Valanciunas,
Luca.
yeah,
Just
really
a
good.
quick one, sorry. Sorry, I was going to get Bridges literally a pick after
Yeah,
him. So yeah, go on. I just wanted to say that that was a great value add at that point of the draft.
yeah, no, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Like, I really like, one, two, three, four here are really good. Jonas Valanciunas, I don't know. Like, he was really good in Memphis last season, and he's been a great fantasy asset. But just with being in New Orleans, he'll space the floor for Zion, but Zion's the guy there. So we'll see
Yep.
how those two share minutes and what the rotations look like. And I really like the flyer and Jaren Jackson. I think he was drafted fairly high in the 5th round. But knowing what kind of player Jaren Jackson is and health permitting, I think he could provide more than 5th round value. So I
Yeah.
really like that. And Jalen Suggs, to me, is a really dark horse steal of the draft. I wanted him the same round, which was, the 8th roundish, the 100th pick overall. I think he could potentially be a top 100 player when it's all said and done this season.
What's funny about that? I had Suggs in my 6th round, believe it or not. But
Yeah.
the way I did my draft, I had like 4 or 5 preferences per slot, so it became a bit paralysis by analysis. And then a lot of the time, my first preference wasn't necessarily drafted because I needed a small forward or something.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make is Suggs was very high on my mock, and even at what was it 95th that Josiah got him or 100,
100, yeah.
I would have taken him much earlier. So
earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to say it was a great selection.
Yeah, I agree. And the only reason why I wasn't taking him earlier is because I was kind of waiting out to see like how long I could let it slip for.
Yeah, me
Because
too.
try get some value. But like for example, notable selections for me before 100 was John Wall at 98. Like I couldn't pass up John Wall at
Yeah,
98, like someone that's, falling to the seventh round that I know is going to give me much better than seventh round value. And I think Lonzo was my other, I took Lonzo in the fifth, but, yeah, like, yeah, just like you say, positioning is important when you're thinking about players, and also just when you see sometimes who's available. Like when you took Drummond, you said that was a value grab for you. That's what I saw
yeah,
John Wall as. So as much as I
yeah.
liked Suggs and I wanted Suggs, I was like, John Wall is my value grab here.
Yeah. And another quick question I just thought of, any pet projects that you have either on your team or not on your team? I guess we can't talk about too many things like that on the waiver wire, but anything that you like from somebody else or someone that you think is going to pop off this year that haven't hasn't already?
Yeah, well, the pet project on my team is definitely Doug McDermott. But
Yep.
another one which I really like is Larry Nance, and we spoke about this a little bit. Larry Nance, really happy, super stoked to have gotten him as soon as the waivers cleared. He was just traded from Cleveland to Portland, and Larry Nance is a player that has always been a great per minutes player, and he can give you some really, really good numbers. And his fantasy issue, sorry, his fantasy issue has always been that he's kind of been in weird situations in terms of just what his role is, where he is in the depth chart. And Cleveland was a very crowded depth chart in, their selection in Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. Like what they already had in that front court was just going to be hard for him to fit in. And as soon as he
Yeah.
was moved to Portland, I had to grab him. And I think he's going to be good for 30 plus this season.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, to speak about mine and similar to yours, they're on my team, and I think it's because I basically created a team with half, boom or bust potential kind of guys with rookies and role players who I think are going to take a big step. But the guys that I'm really interested in seeing, one is being Alperen Sengun, a name that not many people would know and think about, but this guy absolutely terrorized Europe. I'm pretty sure he averaged 23 points and 7.5 rebounds in Europe, and he's a traditional back to the basket type player. He's not the most physically opposing guy, but his post work, his footwork, his silkiness with a baby float, a baby hook or a floater, and also the ability to do high post turnaround jump shots, similar to a Jokic. It just had me mesmerized. I think he's the guy who's going to start for Houston. I think Daniel Tice is going to take a role off the bench, and I think he's the guy who's going to just be like, everyone's going to go, wow, like where did this come
You
from?
th- you,
So
th- you think they'll start him at the center and move Christian Wood to the power forward?
I think so, yeah, because both those guys can shoot, and Christian Wood is more of a 3-point threat, whereas Sangoon can hit them, but he's more of a sort of just inside the 3-point line under the basket type player. And the only other guy I wanted to mention, because I've got a lot of guys like Kaminga, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, but I want to specifically mention Terrence
Yeah,
Mann. I
I knew
think
you
with
would.
Kawhi, yeah, Kawhi being out all season and Terrence Mann having that 40-point playoff game. I know it was only one game, but I heard Clippers fans and NBA analysts just screaming at Tyronn Lue last year, why aren't you playing Terrence Mann more? And I just think he's going to average, look, without sounding crazy, I could see him averaging 17 to 20 points a game, in the right environment if he has his head switched on and his body right and, if he's had a good off season. So I could see him and Paul George spearheading the offense. And another reason why I picked him, I think I picked him, let's have a look, 75th. So that was definitely a reach. He was like ranked 200 on the ESPN ranking.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my ones to look out for. If anyone wants some inspiration for the draft, Terrence Mann, Sangoon, McDermott, and who else are we talking about? Larry Nance Jr.
Yeah, Larry.
They're good names.
I was gonna add just one more since I helped my brother Easy Money Sniper Durant. Durant, if you
Go.
ever watch this, big fans.
Yeah.
I really like a couple of things that I picked out or gave advice for Maxim on this one, which was Evan Mobley. I
Yep,
think Evan
huge.
Mobley can play alongside Jarrett Allen, and I think they're going to work really nicely together. He's a
Yep.
professional, and I think he's just going to be really, really great there. So I really like, and I think yeah, 92nd overall, 7th round. I think he was a really nice little pickup that should turn into something nice. Another couple of things, Reggie Jackson, right at the end of the draft,
Yep.
pretty much,
Huge.
133rd overall. Reggie Jackson is coming off, an incredible playoff performance, and they just shipped off Pat Beverly, so they've just gone a little thinner in their guard rotation, and Reggie Jackson is, set to lead that squad from that perspective. So I think that was a really, really nice pick. And not to harp on Maxim's team too much, but I also liked the Miles Bridges pick at 105th overall in the 8th round. We've spoken about at length. He's my most improved player of the year, and I think he's going to really do a great job. If he can get that from 12-13 to 15-16, which I can see happening at least. He averaged nearly 23 points in that final stretch of the season. So, and you can see what some of those last games, what he was doing. So I think Miles Bridges is going to be a really, really nice little pet project there. Contender for most improved player of the year, and probably going to bring lots of value in the 8th round.
Yeah, as mentioned, Maxim's team is cracked, but that's a good segue. If not you, which team would you bet will win the fantasy season?
Just based on team right now, or
Yeah,
like,
just
me
everything,
knowing
everything. Yeah.
managers. I mean,
No. Like everything, like manager personality, roster, player durability, how they're going to perform at the end of the season. Like, what does your gut tell you who's going to win this season?
um,
And I'm not asking that to set you up to say my team. I'm genuinely saying like pick who you think. Like I don't want to compliment like wink wink nudge
yeah,
nudge.
yeah,
I'm not saying
yeah,
that.
yeah. Look, I really like. Look, I've got obviously faith in you from like a managerial perspective, but I think your
Yeah,
team is a little nerdy, and I
yeah,
think it could go not horribly wrong, but I think it could go wrong.
yeah.
So
Fair comment.
it's just like depending on how things play out for you, I think. But I know you're going to make the right moves to be right up there. It's just gonna yeah, depending on how it all plays out, I definitely like. It's hard for me to say right now that you'd be my pick for winner.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna go like barring me. Obviously, I'm gonna choose me, but I'm gonna go Maxim, not just because he's my brother, but I think he's got a really crack team all the way through. Those final round picks were super high value, and he's
yeah,
got Siakam there in the IR. But if not Maxim, I like Josiah's team as well.
yeah. No, 100%. It's funny because we don't brief on our answers before we do pods, but I was gonna say Josiah, so Den Valley Boys, followed up by Maxim. If Dan, and I know Dan, you're not listening, so I'm not scared to say this, but if Dan was a more active fantasy manager, like if I had that roster, not that I like it, or you had that roster, I would easily say that's the best roster
Yeah,
on
I
paper to
agree.
win the league
Yeah,
because you can make those fringe moves on the waivers to get rid of guys like Pirtle, Anthony, Ibaka probably, and then just fill in some more quality because there's still so many good
100%
players on the
agree.
waiver wire. But yeah, I'm going to say Josiah. I tip my hat off to you. You came second to me last year, and it was a bit of a battle of attrition because of COVID and a lot of things. So I just got lucky. But yeah, there's so many good teams, man. Like yourself, myself, if I do say so for me myself, Dem Valley Boys, Maxim's team, which is Easy Money Sniper Durant. There's just a lot of good teams, and I'm really proud of how the boys drafted this year. So yeah,
Yeah, 100%. I echo that. I think everybody, like, even, we've gone hard on some analysis for some of the squads, but overall, I think everybody did a good job, in certain elements of their team. And I think this is going to be a really active league where there's moves going to be made left, right, and center. So even if we've, spoken a bit of shit about your team today, that doesn't kind of stop anybody from making a move. Propose me a trade. I might look at it. I'm interested. I am interested in some of the players that you got there. I might just might not be telling you. So, but yeah, I think with that, super excited for this fantasy season. We're going to definitely try to do a lot more fantasy talk throughout the season as the NBA kicks off. You know, what we're doing day to day is fantasy, so we'll be bringing a lot more of that element to our pods.
Yeah.
So
And one other final comment, not to set up bad habits, but guys, if we do not do consistent weekly pods, as in every 7 days, don't think we've lost interest. Obviously, it's still a long time till the NBA season begins. There are still things coming out, such as the thing this morning about Ben Simmons definitely going to be traded at some point. We can talk about that in a few days, hopefully. But we're very committed, as you can see on the socials. We're very keen. We were supposed to speak for 30 minutes today. We spoke for an hour and 4 minutes. So
you guys see how it
hopefully,
goes. Yeah.
yeah, but I do thank everyone because we got a bit more of engagement and audience today, which is awesome. And we're just going to keep pumping those numbers and providing the best content possible.
That's exactly it. I echo everything Jake just said there. And thanks everybody that was joining us today. It was awesome reading through all the comments. I keep looking this way because I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, loved engaging with you all. Loved the, I think at one point we had 9 or 10 people tuning in. So we love that. We'll get this up on YouTube and we'll start to maybe clip some stuff, get it on the socials, get your thoughts, and we will maybe we might do a cheeky little waiver wire session for the next one. We'll see how we go. I'm not gonna don't want to give away too much info, but maybe we'll give you a little insight into the brains of Luca and Jake.
my name last year was the king pimp of the waiver wire, so I can't give away too much.
Exactly. No trade secrets being divulged. That's purely for once the camera's off.
That's it. All right, bro.
All right, everybody.
Let's wrap it.
Thanks everybody for joining in. We'll catch you next week, or if not next week, in a few days. Actually, we'll double up this week. So peace out. Thanks everybody for joining.
See you guys. Take care.